Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters, and this is episode 79 of the podcast. So happy you could be with us today. We've got a lot to talk about. The Under 18 World Championship is over. We can talk about Team USA winning gold. We can talk about all of the great draft prospects that played in that event, the great performances. We got a great guest coming up, Steven Ellis from the Daily Faceoff, my old stomping grounds. Now, Steven, of course, doing prospect work there. He will be coming up in a little bit in the show. We'll talk about his travels over to Switzerland to the Under 18 Worlds and some of the guys that he thought really stood out, some of the things that he noticed while there, and also just as such an international hockey fan. If you know anything about Steven Ellis, you know that he loves international hockey, and now he finally got to cover one live. So we'll talk to him all about that. A great guy and a lot of fun to talk to. So we will get into that business later. Also, it's on everybody's mind. The NHL Draft Lottery is up next Monday. We're going to talk about that in depth. I also put out a call to Talking Hockey Sense listeners. What good luck charms or what rituals are you doing to try to bring every bit of good vibes, every bit of good luck, every bit of hope, and everything you could possibly do to make sure that you have everything you need to get ready and get your team Connor Bedard? How do you do it? I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to see what a lot of our listeners said. I got a lot of good answers. We'll share those a little bit later in the show. But before we do all of that, I teased it a little bit already, but we're just going to go ahead and bring him in now. It is my pleasure to welcome the great Steven Ellis to the podcast. He's been on before. You can follow his work at Daily Faceoff. You can follow him on Twitter as well. Just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to international hockey. And now he's gone through his international travels as well. So, Steven, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you again, bud.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, Steven, you are what I would say an international hockey nut. And I am as well. And I think that's why we get along so well, in addition to other things, but probably that mostly. This was your, first opportunity. You went to Switzerland, had a chance to experience the World Under 18 Championship live. Of course, part of your prospect work with Daily Faceoff and doing draft rankings and all those things. I know, my first trip to Europe was also thanks to the World Under 18 Championship. I went to Minsk, Belarus. So Switzerland, a little different for you. But how did you think of the overall experience of just being able to be on site for an international event like that?
That was awesome. Because like all my international tournament experience had been going to the United States, going to Canada. So it was kind of like it's just kind of status quo. But to go here, Switzerland was the one place I always wanted to visit. That like I'm not someone who cares about travel too much. Like if I'm going somewhere, I want to be a part of the event, and that's what made this really cool. But Switzerland is so beautiful. It's so nice. Probably got to be one of the most expensive countries in the world,
Yep.
especially when you're looking at like the price of like a McDonald's coffee being like $12 Canadian was like, hold on a second there. It was cool. The people were great. I got to meet a couple of the local Swiss reporters, and I got to give a huge shout out to the Slovakian hockey fans. I've tweeted about them a few times, but the way they celebrated even just losing that bronze medal game, they were so happy to just be there. Where you look at that Slovakian team and thought like they were winning with like just over a minute to go in the bronze medal game. They thought it was going to happen, yet the players were still happy just to be there. But they were saying like the fans made it worth it. So that was cool. So the whole experience was great. I'm now starting to feel the post travel not feeling greatness. I've done a few COVID tests. Luckily, I'm negative on that point. But I could tell you the having to not sleeping a lot and then going straight to the Toronto Maple Leafs game last night, not good for me physically.
No, it's not. It's always hard. I remember many times coming back from that tournament. It's such a grind too, right? It's 2 weeks
Mhm.
essentially of hockey, and then you've got everything else, and you're also trying to do some things, keeping an eye on the playoffs at home too. I mean, that's always the tough thing to do when you're over there, depending on the time difference, and it's always a significant amount of hours. So that's difficult too. But this was a tournament that was defined by just superstar players for this draft. No Connor Bedard, no Adam Fantilli, no Matvei Michkov. So and no Leo Carlson. So you take away the top four guys that we've been talking about all year, but then it gave everybody else an opportunity to shine. And of course, the United States ends up beating Sweden 3-2 in overtime. The U.S. had to come back from a 2-0 deficit. Ryan Leonard scores the game-winning goal. That was an interesting game. I mean, you were there. I was watching it from home. U.S. didn't play well, but in the end, Ryan Leonard, who's one of the big three of the U.S., including Will Smith and Gabe Perreault, he delivered on in the biggest moment possible. I mean, just your overall thoughts of that U.S. team, that run, and then the way that the tournament ended.
See, now I know you've watched this group and you've watched the American team very closely the last couple of years, but I don't want to say this was like the best that we've seen. But in terms of the way they dominated this tournament, that top line alone was just unstoppable. And you see in the point scorers, and you see Smith, Perreault, and Leonard near the top there. You see what Cole Eiserman and James Hagens are doing out there. I think it's nuts that you can throw out your third line, and on that third line you've got one of the best prospects for 2024 and one of the best prospects for 2025. Like, that's not fair no matter who you play against. But this is a team that managed to score 7 goals in almost every game they played. Like, that's from a pure offensive standpoint, that was nuts. Where a guy like Oliver Moore can have a quiet tournament in retrospect and it still be like he still would have been almost every other team's best player. So it was good to see that team kind of shine through. They played probably their worst hockey in the first half of that game against Sweden, but
Oh yeah.
you don't want to you don't want to have to give the carrot to that team because they were gonna chase it and make it worth it. And it was also great to see Cole Hudson a lot up close. Seeing a lot of the same similarities between him and his brother Lane, except Cole's a bit more physical, he's a bit bigger, and I personally think I like him more at this point in his development than Lane at the same age. So if that's what we're getting, then wow. But just the way that team just attacked you in strides and speed and with skill, and that was probably some of the best hockey I've seen out of Will Smith. A guy could go 5th, 6th, 7th overall. He just dominated with the skill. So that team was it was a blast. They were the best team in the tournament, so they well deserved got that championship game, even though it wasn't an easy final game for them.
No, it wasn't. And just to your point too, talk about Will Smith. This is a guy we recently featured him. We've got a bunch of NHL draft profiles coming out on FloHockey, and we have one coming. We have one available on Will Smith that you can see on YouTube. But he matched the U.S. record for points in a single tournament here. 20 points for him at this tournament, matching Jack Hughes. 1 point shy of 1 point shy of beating or matching Nikita Kucherov from the 2011 World Under 18s. And I was at that tournament. I never thought I'd see that ever again. And then, I've basically seen it almost happen twice now in the last couple of years with Jack Hughes and Will Smith. But just a remarkable talent Will Smith is, dynamic. He's the MVP of the tournament, the Directorate Award winner as the best forward. But yeah, I mean, you definitely go check out that feature about him. We talk a lot about his dynamic skill. But, that was kind of interesting to watch him play off of, the moment. Essentially, he raised his game at a level that I think was pretty substantial. I think that he showed throughout that entire tournament that there was another level for him to get to. I mean, Steven, you've watched him too. Like, we both watched these guys relative to what we saw throughout the season from Will Smith. What do you like? How do you kind of square that, in terms of when we're talking about draft rankings, how he couldn't have raised his stock a whole lot more, but in your mind, seeing a performance like that, did that change anything for you, or did it move the needle even more?
See, I had him kind of as my number 6 guy behind Zach Benson, and I think there's a huge argument to make him probably number 5 there, and probably depending on where Mitchkov goes, probably could even go 4th in the draft. But
Yep.
with him, it's just my biggest complaint about him is it feels like sometimes he tries to do too much, and
Mm-hmm.
when you have two outstanding line mates like he does in Perot and Leonard, you could use him a bit more. But the thing is, like, he just gets away with so much. He's got the skill that he can go out there and it'll be 3-on-1 and he'll come out ahead of you, or he'll shoot from far away when you're not expecting it, and that works out. So this guy's just such a dynamic forward, and that's why he's getting so much attention this year. And I think, we saw it even with him as an underage guy a year ago, where at the same tournament he took over and he was able to put out these shifts where you're like, whoa, holy crap, how did you do that? So a lot of highlight reel moves there. So necessarily, improved the stock for me, but it definitely like solidified, like, yeah, this guy's going to be huge for whatever team picks him up.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. Like the specter of Matvei Michkov in the top however many picks, we don't know where he's going to go. We don't know how teams are ultimately going to decide. Just as a quick sidebar on the Michkov topic, Ivan Rashenko did manage to get out of his contract with Avangard Omsk in the KHL. He's coming over to play for the Washington Capitals. Probably ends up in Hershey to start at least, but as a guy that battled leukemia, and now he's coming over. So, that offers a glimmer of hope, but I think that the deal that Marashchenko had is a little different than the one that Michkov has. We don't have a lot of details about Michkov, who's under contract for an extended period of time, but that's just a brief aside away from the under 18 worlds that, there's a lot of those guys that were under contract in the KHL that they either their contracts expired and they're coming over immediately, or in the case of Marashchenko, they actually got out of their contract early, thanks to the agreement. So I don't think that changes a ton for Michkov, but he does. Where he ends up is going to really affect the stock. And one guy who I think is kind of in that mix, and I don't know if he is for you, but I think he is for me, is Ryan Leonard, who, he had this tremendous tournament. He scores the game-winning goal. You talk to scouts and they say, this is a guy you win with. This is a guy, and literally USA wins with him. He wins the game for them. Physical, powerful, skilled still. What about Ryan Leonard's tournament? I mean, he doesn't produce as much as Perot and Smith, but there are definitely scouts out there that have him ahead of both of them. So what are your thoughts on him and how this tournament impacts your view of him?
I know there were some people that put Leonard down as the MVP of that tournament. So I can tell you a lot of people were very impressed with him, and I was too. And, you know, he was like, for me, the heading into the season, it was like, what could Will Smith do? What could Oliver Moore do? But Ryan Leonard just, there weren't many games where I think he was not the best player out there. He was the physicality. He probably brings a bit more of an overall game than Smith. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Smith, there's so much of that is skill, so much of that is playmaking, the way he thinks the game. But Leonard's could do all that. He's very physical. Could definitely score a lot. We know that's not an issue. And he just, whenever the games got important in that medal round, he just kind of took over. It was like, in the first half of that championship game, I was like, man, he's making mistakes. He looks nervous. But it was like when it went to overtime, he was my pick to score because he can just, again, take over. He's really good positionally. Um, he's a top 10 prospect for me. I think there's just, guys that could be that good, that skilled, but also bring that physicality, could be a good playmaker. And, I thought he also looked good in his own zone. To me, just over the course of the year, he looks like a much more well-rounded player than he was at the start. And I think he's just very confident. I think getting the opportunity playing against some college guys helped. And, this is someone who trains with pros, his brother, obviously, in the Nashville organization. He's worked with pros off the ice during the summer for years. So this is someone that's been kind of just building up for this moment. And I think, he doesn't need to go out there and produce a lot to get it to be valuable. And I think that's something that will get teams excited about him.
Yeah, no question about it. I also want to talk a little bit about the numbers and the NTDP records that fell. If you follow junior hockey, you understand the alumni base that the NTDP has. It's all of basically, many of the best American players in the game today went through that program. All of the recent top first overall picks that are American came from that program. Jack Hughes, Austin Matthews, other guys, Jack Eichel that went very high in the draft, Patrick Kane. Yet now there is a new single season leader for the history of the NTDP in scoring, and that's Gabe Perreault at 132 points this season. The previous record was 117 points. He shattered the record set by Austin Matthews. Jack Hughes had 116 points. He had 2 seasons of over 100 points, which, crazy. But you've got all of those guys that, and then Smith also broke Matthews' record. He just did it after Perreault did. And so he's now second all time and 5 points behind with 127 points. Knowing what you know about the NTDP, about the program, I mean, did you ever think that we would see a 132 point season from anybody? And if you went into the beginning of the season and said it was going to be Gabe Perreault that did it, would you have ever believed that?
No, and you know what? I kind of do expect those numbers set by those star guys in the mid 2010s to continue to fall. And part of that is because the program continues to get better, the depth continues to get better year after year, and as more high quality players continue to take this route, they're not going to the OHL all the time. They're not um, skipping out to play just in the USHL. And I think that's kind of interesting because you look at William Moore for next year, for example. That's a guy I've seen a lot of over the last couple of years here in the GTHL. It's like, well, he's lived most of his life in Canada. That's the thought of him going over there seems a little weird, but this is an opportunity where the talent just continues to get better. With Perreault, no, I did not expect that to happen whatsoever. And, so many times this year and talking to other scouts, it's like, he's the third best player on that line. And I'd still argue that, in that tournament, he was still probably the third best guy on that line. But you don't break the scoring record by accident. Like, that's the thing. It's like
Right.
people will point out that, he's got two great playmakers that do all the work, or could do a lot of the work, and he'll be there for like the rebound or whatever. But I think the one thing he showed in the last half of the season was just how skilled of a player he is, with just some of the creativity. He's a great playmaker. He got a lot of assists in this tournament, but he's not just out there just getting rebounds, kind of like the thought of it was kind of early in the season, where it's like, oh, he's just there and just finishing the plays off. Which the fact that he's in those scoring positions, I think, is so important. So, do I think he's a guy that can, be the play driver at the next level? I don't. But if he's got a guy who can, and we know that that top line going to the same school, we'll continue to see more of that. I think that just he's a finisher, and that's the fact he put those many goals up this year, this many points and everything. It's something where he's going to be very legit, and he was probably one of the guys that moved up the most for me in this tournament, just because like it's again, it felt like he wasn't relying on his teammates as much as maybe at some other points this year. He was the one doing a lot of the work. So, while
Yeah.
I'm not, there's still some concerns. The skating is not my favorite, but I still think just from a skill perspective, the guy's got a lot going for him.
Yeah, the skill, and I just think the hockey sense is next level for him, and really that's the defining characteristic of his game for me because we talk about the skating, the size, the strength. There, he's not the biggest. He's not going to blow you away with speed. He's not going to do we haven't released his profile yet, but you're going to hear a lot of these same things in the profile that we produced about him. But the thing about Gabe Perreault, and son of Yannick Perreault, brothers Jacob, plays in the Ducks system, and a first round draft pick. He just makes so many plays. I mean, just makes so many plays, and that's the thing. Even when he's not producing, the creativity that he shows, his ability to make passes with his body in like weird positions. Like there was one like little hook pass that he gave kind of around his body that sprung Will Smith for an open chance, and it's just like not many guys can do that and execute at that level. And then 132 points. I never thought we would see a 120 point season. I worked there, been around some of the best players that have ever played there, and have watched the Jack Eichels and the Jack Hugheses and the Austin Matthews very closely. Never thought that we would see that, and the fact that it was Gabe Perreault, it's not a mistake. He is a big draft riser. You take some of the concerns into account, but I think when you have a player that thinks the game at the level that he seems to, that's where I see a tremendous opportunity in front of them for, just basically, for him to be a legitimate NHL player. When at the beginning of the season, I could have said maybe, I don't know. He's a draft pick for sure. Is he a first rounder? I don't know. Then he starts putting up the points. Then you start watching him more, and the maturity is incredible. I do want to talk about two more. Well, we could talk about a lot of USA players, but I want to move on. But before we do that, I do want to talk about Trey Augustine because I think he often gets overlooked in terms of how much of a player he is. We have our most recent draft profile about Trey Augustine is now available on YouTube and FloHockey. Steven, you got a chance to see him up close and personal in that gold medal game. To me, that was his best game. And I also thought that that's one of the best games I've seen him play internationally, period, although he did have some good moments at the World Junior Championship. But to me, Trey Augustine solidified himself in the conversation with the Carson Bjarnasons, with the Michael Robbles, with the Adam Guions, the different goalies that we've talked about as potential top guys. Did he do that for you? And then also just in that gold medal game performance, I mean, I don't think USA wins without him. I mean, I could have seen a path forward for them without him having the performance that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. Augustine is one of my favorite goalies in this draft, and you look at his overall record this year, and I think it was like something like one loss in
One
regulation this
loss in
year. It's like,
regulation. One loss in regulation.
yeah,
Yes.
so there you go. And you look at him at the World Juniors, and he was great there. He had to take over the starting role from the guy who was the number one during the summer, and like that's no
Yeah.
small thing to happen there. And he was very good in that tournament. Not so great in that bronze medal game, but you look at the goalies at both ends, neither were. So that is what it is. But for a guy like Augustine, there wasn't a lot of times this year where he had to seal the show, and a lot of that goes to, when you play on a team that good, it happens like that. But when you look at some of the great defense cores that the U18 team has had, this is not one of them. This is a
No.
very kind of ho-hum, not a lot of these guys I think are going to be like NHLers. And he had to make some big saves. But that game in the game Sweden where, Noah Erliden was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
My one concern there for the Americans was like they never seemed to shoot high on him for a guy as small as that was. They kept shooting toward his pads. And with Augustine, he's a guy talking to him around the junior time, World Juniors, and he was saying that he's a big UC Saros fan. And that's something a lot of these goalies are becoming. Like they're all fans of him because he's not this big guy, and Augustine's not either. And you could kind of see just the way that he's very athletic and the way he uses his legs to push himself around the crease as effectively as he was, and how he reads the play. You could see some signs there. With this goalie class, I'm still not committing to who my number one is. It really seems to
Yeah.
depend, kind of
It's hard.
like just depending on the month. It's not an easy time, and like that's not necessarily meaning it's a bad goalie draft. It's not a great one by any means, but it's like there's not a lot of guys that I can pin as your number one. But with the way Augustine plays, is like I think again he was so underrated, but I don't think they win a lot of the games that they do this year without the way he plays because yeah, you expect this team to score a lot, but defensively they give up a lot of shots still. And I thought this tournament didn't necessarily hurt or help him, but it just kind of again shows that this is a guy that when you need him to be good, he can be good, and I'm kind of excited to
Yeah.
see where he goes the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I think he's going to get a lot of starts at Michigan State right off the hop. I think that helps in terms of projecting him out and his development arc and all those different things. Like he's going to play a lot in college. I think he's got a great comfort level with Adam Nightingale, the head coach at Michigan State, who was the NTDP U18 coach last year. And the one thing that Dan Muse said to us in the piece that we did was the thing that really stands out about Trey Augustine is how he prepares. His preparation for games, that calm demeanor in the net. I think that's born out of his preparation. He's such a hard worker. Everybody said, his unrelenting work ethic to be better, and to constantly improve is, something that is unique to him, even among his peers. So I found that very interesting as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see where they go, but we spent a lot of time on the champs and we can't go through the entire tournament, but what I do want to ask you, Steven, is, away from Team USA, was there any player there that you came away from in this tournament and you said, I got to move this guy up? And it's the one thing I will say is, like, people like us, we look at these tournaments, we are looking at the complete picture, but single events can move the needle in certain ways. They reveal certain things. So my question to you is, even given the small sample, was there anybody that did enough in this event that said to you, I got to move this guy up because he's done, there are things about his game that I'm seeing here that I maybe haven't seen before, or that I didn't know he was good at, or that I think he's a lot better at than I thought? anybody in particular stick out when I talk in those terms?
Yeah, the thing about this tournament is it didn't feel like there was any massive risers, and there definitely wasn't a amount of fallers. But the one that I think was the guy that really just was good to see consistently was Otto Stenberg, and
Mm,
someone that in my kind of mid-season rankings was like, yeah, this guy, top 20. I'm liking this, and then just watching him in the SHL and seeing how like it didn't seem like he was confident at all. There was games he wasn't playing a ton and wasn't getting important minutes, and it's like it was nice to see him go out there and be able to dominate for the Swedes. But a big reason for that, though, was because of David Edstrom, his line mate, who I
mm.
thought was, a guy that I didn't get to see a whole ton of this year. And it was like I wanted to see what he was capable of. And talking to some scouts, like, yeah, this is going to be one of the best players in this tournament. And I'd say, yeah, he was. Sweden did not have a perfect tournament by any means, which is kind of funny because they just had the one loss and was in overtime. But this is a team that I think once they kind of got to the lead, they kind of kept it safe outside of those games against Canada where they kind of just continued to obliterate everybody. But it was a thing where it was a good job kind of by the top nine for the most part. But for David Edstrom out there, I just thought this was someone who, was very quick, very aggressive. He kind of just did a lot of things out there for that group. And, Stenberg got a lot of the credit. Stenberg was my MVP pick. It was very close. Sorry, no, not Stenberg. He was one of the forward picks. It was Dalibor Dvorsky was my MVP pick, but with Stenberg, I just thought, the way he's able to control the play against kids his own age with that level of confidence. And I talked to him, and it's like, what's the deal? Like, how are you so good in international play against your own age group, but you just kind of you're quiet against the men? And he's just like, it's part of it is confidence, and part of it is just getting that ice time. And he says like. It's so motivating to be trusted in a situation like this and getting to play those minutes in the SHL is a good learning experience. But then you come here and you're expected to be a big player. He says he thrives under that. So to me, for sure, it's Stenberg and Edstrom are the two guys I really love watching.
Yeah, I think those are two really good picks because and that's a great point about Stenberg too is internationally he does look different. You watch him among his peers in Sweden, you say this guy is so much better than most of these players, and he's such makes such an impact. And yeah, so now to see him and it's important to see him in this environment do it. I think that the full picture, it's still maybe he is a 20 or below pick, that very well could be. He's not the biggest guy, but I think he showed great compete. I thought his pace was better. I thought his skill looked really good, and he had some finishing ability. And Edstrom, I mean, I just think that the upside and the ceiling on him is what scouts are certainly drooling over. There's so much there to like, and the size package and everything else. So I think that's really good. I want to hit you with two more things before we go, including one little draft lottery bit. But before I get you out of here, I do want to talk about some of the guys that maybe underwhelmed, guys that we were hoping could come into this tournament and make a statement and didn't. That's not to say that these guys are bad or that they're going to be bad or that their prospects are, but it is a key moment for them, and not everybody delivers. So, any thoughts on anybody that you thought, man, he really didn't help himself here?
I want to zero in on Canada here, and for sure, got to go with Cam Allen.
Mm,
I don't even know what to say about him. It seemed like he was actively trying to play for the opponents every game. This was someone who, a lot of my notes on him was just giveaway, 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 and I was so high on him. When we saw him last year in
yeah, me
Guelph, and
too.
I got to see him a year before he was drafted into the OHL, the year before the COVID year, and thought, this guy's got a good future here. I still think there's a lot of upside there, but like decision making, it just like I had talked to a scout who was asking, like, "Do you know if he's concussed?" It's like that's never a good thing to say about a guy in a situation like that.
No.
It just unfortunately, he just did not look like he was just all there, and it's too bad because I know he's a quality player, and I think he could be a a first round prospect, but he didn't really do himself favors there, where he was making mistakes. There were some bad penalties. It wasn't great. The other one being Riley Height, a guy that I'm definitely very high on for his offensive skill, but he didn't really produce a ton. And he came in, I think it was after the second or third game he joined Canada, and um, it looked like he just wasn't comfortable. This is someone who
Mhm.
had to play some pretty big minutes in the WHL, had to do some big things, and it just didn't seem like he was ever at 100%. Um, and it's
And
for
a
a guy
later
like
rival
that, you
too, so that can happen
yeah,
too. Yeah, trying to
yeah,
get
it's like
into
the
it. But
thing.
yeah,
That's the thing I thought that maybe you could attribute to it. It's like, he came late. He just wasn't able to get fully adjusted there, but he just didn't look comfortable with the puck. He was not as as quick, not as active on the puck as we were used to seeing him. So those are the two guys that to me kind of just underwhelmed.
yeah. It was. I think that the Canadian team was set up to be a lot better than it ended up being. And part of that is because of lack of time to prepare. You get the team together, you go over, you practice a few times, and then you play. It's really hard to do that. And I think at times too, Andrew Crystal was the guy that really had a lot to prove in this. And I wasn't there, so I didn't. But I watched every game, and it's just like towards the end, I think he started to find himself a little bit more. I thought he was good in the
Mhm.
bronze medal game. He had some key plays in the bronze medal game. But I think that a lot of the concerns that we have about him as a player, feet, just the feet with the size, it's not, I always say this is like, you can be a smaller player or a bad skater. You really can't be both. I don't think he's a bad skater. I just don't think it's, we're talking NHL caliber. The threshold is so high for that. And so, yeah, but that's one. And then one last thing about the under 18s, you are Canadian. I think we should have the full disclosure. We got a Canadian on the
Mhm.
podcast. But we saw Macklin Celebrini, who we've been watching over here in the United States for all year, go and play for Canada at the under 18 Worlds. And then he ties the Canadian record for points in a single tournament with 50 on the last play of the game, of their
Mhm.
last game, scoring the game winning goal of the bronze medal. Um, I'm not sure how much you've seen Celebrini up close and in person this season, but thoughts on that, because basically that's a continuation of what he's done. He was also named USHL Rookie of the Year this week. That's a continuation of what he's done. But on the other hand, it was incredible to see him that dominant among his peers, even though he's a year younger than most of them. Your thoughts on him?
And that was the first time I've got to see him up in person, and wow, that's
Mm.
I talk a lot to Ryan Sykes about how seeing him in Chicago, and he always says like this guy's gonna be the real deal, and it's like yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly the impression I got. He struggled in that first game. It seemed like he was always having to play defense because of just how much Sweden was kind of controlling the play there. But it seemed like he took that first game loss personally because he just went on a rampage after that. Was great against Germany. Obviously, we saw how good he was with Matt Wood and Cal Ritchie during that medal round, particular. But just like I've seen a lot more of Cole Eiserman, and when you look at Eiserman, this is a guy who's got so much skill and he's got a great shot, and that shot's the thing that scouts will continue to look at. But I think from an all around perspective, there's a reason why Celebrini's being considered the top pick for next year, and I think it's still too early to say how strong of a draft this would be, or next year's draft will be, and how maybe he'd compare to some of the top guys this year. But with Celebrini, it's just the hockey IQ there is just off the charts, and that he's willing to take risks with the puck. He's willing to go against one versus three guys out there, and he'll come out on top often because he's just kind of got everything going from him for a skill perspective. So, uh, you know, first time seeing him, getting to talk to him, it was funny saying like, "Are you going to cheer for the Americans?" I know you're like good friends with Cole Eiserman. He's like, "Yeah, I'm cheering for the Americans," and it's like I don't think I'd ever expect someone from Hockey Canada to say they were cheering for the Americans, but yeah, that was cool. And then the best part was when Celebrini actually told JD Burke from Elite Prospects that he wants the Canucks to rebuild. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Mac, great kid, great personality. It's been great to get to watch him this year. And then to see him doing on that stage was pretty impressive. And yeah, so we'll get into. We talk about him all the time on this podcast, but I had to get somebody else talking about him so that people don't think that I'm just talking till I'm blue in the face that this kid's the real deal. But before we let you go, do want to talk about the NHL Draft Lottery. I'm going to close out the show talking about that a little bit more. But I have a bit of a different question for you. Like we've all talked about, like where's the best fit for Connor Bedard, all this other stuff. When you look up and down the lottery range this year, which of those teams is in the worst position? Like, you didn't have to finish last this year. Like, I mean, like, I'm talking like where they are as an organization, as a franchise right now. I think I have my pick, but I'd be interested to hear, like, as you look at the Ducks finished last, the Blue Jackets won a meaningless game at the end of the season that tanked their chances of getting the best odds at Bedard. The Blackhawks went on a tiny little run that cost them the best odds. I mean, in that range, Montreal, all of them, where which of those teams do you feel like is like really kind of in trouble, or just in the weakest position moving forward? And that, to me, is where, Connor Bedard suddenly becomes much more important.
Oh, that's a very good question. Very good take
It's
on
a
this
tough one.
question
I
because when you
wish
look,
I wish I prepped you for this, because I was thinking about it. I was like, I need help with this.
it's like it's tough. It's like, for me, when at the beginning of the season, I should probably say maybe mid-October, it was like I got to ask, like, which team would make the most sense for him to go to, and I'm like Anaheim, because that team's just going to have a very solid future. They got some good depth at every position. I'm very excited to see what that team's going to do. It's like, oh man, I the first name that just comes to mind, and it isn't all just for hockey reasons, is the Arizona Coyotes. But even then, you're looking at a team that's got Logan Cooley, and it's gonna
Yeah.
they're still gonna look good. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like I almost feel like if we want to count a team outside of the top five, like maybe do you go like St. Louis, a team that's like kind of just in this mushy middle where they've sold off, but
Right.
they don't have like a all the pieces right now. Philadelphia, maybe same thing. Washington. Um, but I think just no matter where he goes, he's gonna make that team significantly better. And as a person who's based in Eastern Canada, you look if he goes to Anaheim, he goes to Arizona, I'm probably not going to see him a ton. But you see him on a team like Columbus and a group they spent the money and got Johnny Gaudreau and they got some decent young guys in the system. That would go a long way. But I'd say if a team that wouldn't make a lot of sense right now, I'm going St. Louis, but obviously with the 10th best odds, they don't have a great shot.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think, to me, the team that looks like it's like in the most trouble, and it's in a variety. Like, I mean, to me, it's Chicago is in like a really bad spot. Like, just not.
Mm-hmm.
They're there on purpose. Like, they're there on purpose. It's not like, they basically had to do a tear down, a studs down, tear down. No Jonathan Taves anymore, no Patrick Kane. So you are basically starting over. The question is, is Lucas Reichel, Kevin Korchinski, Frank Nazar, recent draft picks, are they future core players, or are they future guys that are going to help you? That's the question that needs to be answered. But I think Philadelphia is another one. They're kind of on the front end of this. They're still, like Sean Couturier is still injured. You've got, they kind of fumbled their way into it, not completely on purpose. Like, they got guys like Kevin Hayes and James Van Riemsdyk. They tried to make a push, then they got injuries that just destroyed them. But you've got your core goaltender, different things like that. But I think, like, Chicago probably needs. I don't think that there would be anybody in the league outside of Chicago happy if Chicago got Connor Bedard, just because they had their good fortune already, and then also, for various other reasons that people don't want them to have success anytime soon. But it's interesting, and I think it's crazy. I can't wait to like dive into once the lottery odds are set. I've kind of restrained. I usually do a pre-draft lottery mock draft, just to say, if nothing changes, here's what it is. But it's going to change, and it could change dramatically. And with Connor Bedard at the top, it feels like it could change everything about your franchise. So, but yeah, but it was Steven Ellis, ladies and gentlemen, one of the best, a great guy, and I'm so happy that you are at Daily Faceoff, uh, holding down the draft coverage over there with Frank Saravalli and a great group. Where can people find your work, and where are you on Twitter? And just any last plugs for you before we let you go?
Yeah, so daily face-off, obviously. That's where it'll be a lot of my stuff. It's a lot of NHL, a lot of kind of every level of hockey, women's hockey, junior hockey. Actually, today I published my review of well over 100 prospects from the U18s. That took a long time. And
I
I'm
would
going to
think
have
so.
some updated draft. Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, it took a while. Finished late last night. I'm going to be doing a lot of pre-draft stuff, a lot of post-draft stuff. And yeah, my Twitter is S Ellis Hockey. Used to have a check mark. I don't anymore.
Yeah, as so many of us don't. But Steven, thanks so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you, and enjoy the draft lottery and all of the race to put all of our content out as soon as it's over. So, but it's great to have you, and glad you're back on in North America. So, thanks again, buddy. Great to have you on the show.
I'm very glad to be back.
All right. Well, we are so pumped to have had Steven here, but we are going to close things out with the NHL Draft Lottery. We talked a little bit with Steven about that, but I wanted to ask you, the fans, because you are the ones that are most impacted by this. I grew up a Chicago Blackhawks fan. Full disclosure, I would say since I've worked in hockey professionally for the last 15 years, I don't really have a team anymore. That is Chicago Stadium right behind me, but that's more for nostalgic purposes. So I am agnostic, I guess, when it comes to the NHL Draft Lottery. You, however, the fans are not. So I asked the listeners of Talking Hockey Sense and my followers on Twitter, what are your rituals? What are you trying to do? What are your superstitions? What are your good luck charms? And you brought them to me. And I am so pleased that you did, because I am so excited to talk about those, because honestly, there's really nothing you can do, but you can try. And I appreciate you tried. So we're starting things off hot with CBJ prospects, because CBJ prospects, they have a lot of skin in the game here. This is a Connor Bedard feels like a real possibility. And CBJ Prospect says, I'll just say the jersey I'm wearing to the CBJ Draft Lottery watch party is a bit of, it's only stupid if it doesn't work. And so I had to ask a follow-up and a question. I had to make sure that I understood. And CBJ Prospect said the jersey they're going to wear, it's a Kent Johnson throwback Canada jersey. So that's for Connor Bedard, who was on that team. But also, Kent Johnson went to Michigan, which is where Adam Fantilli goes. And then he's also probably going to bring a couple of additional jerseys, like the Russian jersey and maybe a Sweden jersey, so that they can cover all bases there. But CBJ Prospects, I wish you nothing but the best in that. I hope that it works out for you. I think that Bedard or Fantilli at CBJ makes a ton of sense. All right, we're going to move on to the Chicago Blackhawks fan portion of this, because we got a good one from Pete. And Pete is saying he is going to go to Tankathon and spin the Tankathon wheel until the Blackhawks get the first pick. And he's going to leave that tab open like that until the draft lottery. A good strategy, just basically saying, if you have never run a Tankathon thing, you go to Tankathon, just search it up on Google. It'll run you a draft lottery simulation, and it will either crush your dreams or it will make all of your fantasies come true, although it's not really true because it can't happen. We also got one from Long Haired Gap, and he says his ritual for the draft lottery is going to be to convince himself that Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson has a plan if they don't get the top two picks. And I think they do. Basically the Blackhawks are in a position now where I think that they're going to be thrilled if they're in the top four. They know that means it's either going to be, Leo Carlson, or it's going to be, one of the other, Matvei Michkov, or maybe it's a Will Smith, a Ryan Leonard, who they have a lot of options if they're still within that top four. I think that's where they would want to be. You pose this question about the NHL Draft Lottery, and you're going to get a series of responses from Detroit Red Wings fans who are completely resigned to the fact that they will never win the draft lottery. I believe the last time they've not picked first in a very long time. And so a loyal listener of this podcast, MVP, I feel your pain. He says, I'm a Wings fan, so the night usually involves a lot of crying. And I can only imagine why. I mean, when you don't win the draft lottery, when you've had so many opportunities, and you think about it too, where the Red Wings are in their development as an organization, they've got their goalie of the future in Sebastian Cossa. They've got their defenseman of the future in Simon Edmondson, and they already have Moritz Seider, who's their defenseman of the now and the future. You've got long-term agreement with Dylan Larkin. You've got Lucas Raymond. So you feel like a core is starting to form, but now you need a centerpiece. Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, one of those players could be a centerpiece. So if you're a Detroit Red Wings fan, you're begging for it, just like Yost Built is. I'm a Wings fan, he says, so I clearly haven't hit the right combo yet. So if you have any suggestions, send them to @YostBuilt, because they're going to need some suggestions. Maybe anything you could do, unless you're not a Detroit Red Wings fan, and then in which case, don't even bother. But here, this is probably my favorite suggestion of them all. It is the most involved, and this one comes from Tom. Tom says, I would trade the 6th round pick for Taylor Hall with the promise to trade him back to Boston within a week. He's clearly the good luck charm for the NHL Draft Lottery. # bring it to Broad. Well, certainly the Philadelphia Flyers could use some good luck. They could use a top tier pick. The last time they picked this, that high in the draft, 2nd overall, Nolan Patrick, didn't work out. They ended up trading him. Patrick, unfortunately, had a ton of injuries, still hasn't managed to put a complete season together. It's bad luck. And so now you need a little good luck. Taylor Hall, why is he the good luck charm? Well, he was the first of 4 first overall picks of the Edmonton Oilers. He also went to the New Jersey Devils, and they got Nico Hischier, and they got Jack Hughes after that. So Jack Hughes, you got Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, 2 first overall picks. Taylor Hall is magic. All right. We also have Jesse and Bucks have. They're the last team that could possibly get Connor Bedard, who is a North Vancouver native. And Jesse says, usually I wear my lucky socks, but being a Canucks fan, I'm beginning to think they don't work. If they work this year, those are magic socks, and I will buy them from you, because just wash them first. Our last one, and this is another good ritual. Big Tortilla, thinking with his stomach, and I appreciate that. Big Tortilla says, I have a pre-draft lottery meal. I make carne asada tacos with homemade tortillas because I am Big Tortilla, and then my Coyotes get pushed back in the draft. I look to my paper and I see who the best players are that we could pick. So maybe not the carne asada this time around if the Coyotes keep getting pushed back, but I think, they got Logan Cooley last year. They got some really good draft prospects. Clayton Keller came around. Could you add another big piece in this draft lottery? Very possible. So maybe not carne asada, maybe something else this time around, Big Tortilla, but we appreciate you sending in your suggestions. Well, that's about all the time we have for this week. I really appreciate Steven Ellis coming in. I appreciate all of you for sending in your good luck charms. If I were to have a good luck charm, I think what I used to do is my good luck charm was spearmint gum. Spearmint gum, and if the luck went bad, you change out the gum. And then if it doesn't turn around, you changed out. Did it mean anything? No, but it seems to help. So that's my good luck ritual. I won't be chewing any gum on Monday night. I don't care who wins. I just care that we're going to get an order for the top half of the draft, and we are going to love it. It is on Monday, May 8th. The NHL did move the time back to 8 p.m. Eastern for the draft lottery. So now you have to wait 1 hour longer than you were supposed to see where Connor Bedard is going to end up. But we will have complete coverage post-lottery on FloHockey. Do not miss that. And while you're at FloHockey, make sure you subscribe. We have the Kelly Cup playoffs and the Clark Cup playoffs. Clark Cup is going into the conference finals. We got the Youngstown Phantoms versus the Chicago Steel. We got the Fargo Force versus the Lincoln Stars. Best of 5 series. That starts this weekend. You will not want to miss that. Macklin Celebrini is back with Chicago, fresh off of that tournament win, the bronze medal with Canada. And then also in the ECHL, we're about to head into the second round. Going to be a lot of fun. Some great series there. All of the division finals, 1 step away from the conference finals, and then 2 steps away from the Kelly Cup being handed out. You will be able to see every single game of the Kelly Cup playoffs on FloHockey. So subscribe today. And if you haven't yet subscribed to this podcast, you can follow us on YouTube. You can follow us on FloHockey. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch us on the Flow Sports app. So do not miss a single episode. We've got lots more NHL draft stuff. Next week, we'll talk about the NHL Draft Lottery. We might even mock draft a little bit for you. And we'll get some more conversation about Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, and all the guys you've heard about all year, but even some that maybe you haven't heard enough of yet. So join us next week on Talking Hockey Sense. This has been a pleasure. My thanks to Steven Ellis. Huge thanks to Nico Reyna for producing today's show. Thanks to everybody that sent in their superstitions and good luck charms. I'm Chris Peters. This is Talking Hockey Sense. We'll catch you next time.